Welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Hello and welcome to the show. It's full holiday season in Montana. I was at Target last night. The shelves were empty. I don't know if all my goods are out there off the coast of California in Long Beach in one of those 100 container ships, or if we've just bought them all. We've got the Canadians coming across the border up here, and this is where they do all their shopping. We're just south of Eureka, so we're happy to have them. We're happy to have the holidays upon us, and I'm also happy to bring great guests to you. Today I have Jeff Mount on the line. Good afternoon, Jeff.
Jim, it's good to talk to you. How are you?
I'm doing great. And by the way, I appreciate you having me on your show last week. We kind of live in opposite worlds, but yet all the same. So I think we can get some good messaging out today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
One thing I want to hear from you later on in the show is there's a quote on your website. It's not necessarily a quote, but it's a point. Visualize your financial future in 10 minutes or less. So
Yes.
That's my teaser for later on in the show. But I want to hear about a little bit about your past, where your success came from, and how you got to where you're at now. And then we can talk about visualization later.
Sure. So I grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia. We were a lower middle class family, living paycheck to paycheck. It was fine, and my entire community was kind of in the same boat. And there was a certain degree of skepticism that came from that big, you're never going to get out of this, you're never going to retire, you're never gonna. And I was fortunate in that early on, I just believed that. And decided that the way I was going to escape was I was going to become a professional tennis player.
Oh, okay.
So I really went all the way in, and I did play in high school. I did play in college. I did play the satellite, but I didn't make any money. If you're not top 50 in the world, you're really not going to do well financially in that business. And of course, wrecked my knee at the age of 25 playing squash, which was my passion.
Yeah.
Tennis was my profession, but squash was more fun. When that happened, I was pulled into the financial services business. First as an advisor to other tennis pros, and then eventually as what they call a wholesaler. So for 25 years, I spent time coaching advisors and helping them to become more productive and to scale their business. And of course, I'd coach them through all of the strategies we had. And then about 2 years ago, I got a call from one of my favorite clients who had retired, sold his book of business. And he said, "Can you help me publish this book I just wrote?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, Mike, let me see what it is." He sends over this book. It's 3 parts. The first part was dynamic mapping. What is it and what makes it different than the traditional method, which is more institutionally based? The second part of the book was a bunch of case studies, kind of proving the point. And the third part of it was 95 pages of rocket science math. And that is not something I can sell.
Yeah.
So had to sit down with him, and I was ready to make some kind of a move. And he said, "Why don't we turn this into a business where we'll take the third part and we'll build an app that will be really, really easy for anyone to use. And of course, on our side, we'll do all the heavy lifting with the math. And then, of course, we'll teach people all about dynamic mapping." Initially, it was going to be a productivity tool like it always been. And then, of course, COVID happened. I couldn't travel. So we had to make a hard pivot in January. And we did so by rebuilding the app user-friendly. So it has 30 strategic videos in the app that anyone can view to reach financial independence. And of course, once you get there, the strategies change. But more importantly, we are approaching HR departments in corporate America to help them start to fulfill that financial wellness initiative that they've been talking about for the last 20 to 30 years, but really have done nothing towards.
So, you know, a lot of people during COVID just shut doors and didn't pivot left or right. They just sat on their rears. It sounds like you guys made a big move to get after an app and make a change.
We had to. Pivots are painful. They're time consuming. You're throwing a lot of time and money away to recreate yourself. But we do recognize long term, this is a much bigger opportunity. And as we're talking to the employee benefits providers, there's a real high level of excitement over this because it is not the old school spreadsheets, pie charts, and bar graphs. It is a sailing through life metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's people always ask, well, why'd you pick sailing? That's, maybe I don't like sailing. Sailing picked us. If you do the math for both your assets into the future, as well as your future value liabilities, it naturally creates the image of a sailboat. Mm-hmm. And how big your sails are is dependent upon how well you are prepared for that particular family purpose. And we don't do just retirement. We do wedding planning and we do college tuition planning. Your mortgage can be in there. We'll show you all the conflicts that are there. And then, of course, it has to be dynamic. So there are tailwinds and boulders. Tailwinds, of course, are good, like an inheritance, vested stock options, sale of a family business. Boulders are bad. That's divorce, layoffs, illness or injury, that type of stuff. So all of that is available in there and is dynamically presented. And of course, there's all kinds of tips as to how to cope when those things happen.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw some hardballs at you. We've got listeners from across the United States of all different backgrounds and from both types of political parties. And we've got some people thinking, hey, we're on the point of collapse here. How do I protect my money? Where do I put my money? Do I just keep cash? Do I buy assets, gold and silver? What are your thoughts about where we're going in the next couple of years as it relates to smart advice for people and their money right now?
So the hot topic is inflation, right? And that's not political. It is what it is.
Yeah.
The inflation that we are experiencing right now is the same toxic level of inflation that we had back in the 70s and 80s. What I'm talking about here is not commodities-based inflation, but wage-based inflation. Mm-hmm. We're seeing that. And of course, once that starts to really go, the good news is the beginning of that cycle feels good. You have full employment. You've got lots of income. You're feeling like you're making more money, but the truth is your purchasing power is going down quickly. And at some point, the inflation takes a really ugly turn. The party stops and the hangover kicks in. And that's when it gets really, really bad. I always hear a lot of advisors say to me, well, just stay in the stock market. Over the long term, that's the best place to be. Well, over the long term is true. But when you start talking about the back half of the inflation story, stocks typically don't do well. Mm-hmm. And here's why. As inflation goes up, interest rates go up. That, of course, improves the yields on newly issued bonds, which means from a risk-adjusted return perspective, the bonds are going to be more attractive than the stocks. Even if you have dividend-paying stocks like the blue chips, they're going to try to raise their dividends to be competitive for those investment dollars, but then that means no money for research and development and the normal growth activities. So at some point, it hits a wall, and that is going to be very, very challenging. Now, at the same time, in the short term, bonds are zero. Buying bonds right now is going to be painful later. So you're right. You should be thinking about things that are inflation protected, whether it be TIPS on the bond side, Treasury inflation protected securities, or whether it's managed futures, which of course are commodities, because there's no question in both a wage-based and commodities-based environment where inflation is rearing its ugly head. If you own the commodities, you have the opportunity to give yourself some appreciation during that period of time.
Well, fortunately, I've got it pretty simple. I've got enough pasture out here. I just add a few more cows out there, which I can sell any day of the week, and I've got my own portfolio.
There's a great story. It's an urban legend, so I'm not sure if it's true, but it's told by every economist who knows a lot about inflation, that during World War I, or right after World War I, there was a shepherd in Germany who decided that he wanted to expand his operations, become the biggest in all of Europe. So he went to the biggest bank there in Germany and got a 30-year loan. And it was a fairly reasonable rate. And in 3 years, if you recall, after Germany's World War I, they let inflation run wild. And they did so to devalue the pain that they were going to have to pay in terms of reparations. Well, this shepherd was able to pay off the entire 30-year loan by selling one sheep.
There you go. There you go. Well, so talk to me about visualizing your financial future. And you can do it in less than 10 minutes, I'm sure.
You you can absolutely. So the Dynamic Map app does allow you to input the data for whatever. It could be your retirement, along with your spouse. It could be your kids saving for their wedding. It could be the college tuition. All of that stuff can be in there, and you will be able to visualize your boat. And then there's a little gamification to it. So at the top of the screen above where you see your graph, you'll see four possible outcomes. The best outcome is when your sails are full, you pull into port and the fireworks go off and there are kids there waiting for you. The worst case scenario is it's a full-on thunderstorm. Your sails are down. You're stuck between two boulders and the water's really rough. And of course, there's two in between there. As we evolve this, we're going to improve the graphics. Right now, they're kind of cartoonish looking, but we're going to really gamify this thing to get people thinking about it. And it is interesting when you look at this, because so many people for so many years have been dealing with 50 to 200 page financial plans. I don't know if you've ever gone through that experience.
Oh, yeah.
It is boring as hell. And I see so many people just look up with their water come out of their eyes saying, what do you want me to do? I'm just so bored. I don't know what to do, which, of course, is not exactly the beginning of a trusting conversation. They don't know where they are. You will know exactly where you are based on the condition of your boat and based on the four outcomes we talked about. What is interesting is the people who are downloading this, and we get this from Google Analytics, and are using it, we find men 25 to 35 love to play with this thing at lunchtime and at 5 o'clock.
Yep, I'm sure.
We also find men 55 to 65 are playing with us a lot, almost as much, but at midnight, which means, of course, they're worried about, do they have enough money for retirement? And they're exploring all the what ifs that this tool provides. Where we're missing are females. Less than 20% of the downloads are females, and males 35 to 55. And I have some theories on this, and we have a couple of projects in the works to help connect with those people, because we find that women generally are more emotional when it comes to this type of thing.
Yep.
So we're going to try to connect with them on an emotional level. I don't want to give away too much yet. And the males 35 to 55 are just not yet thinking about retirement. They're thinking about their kids and getting through college. So again, it's going to be in more of an emotional connection. And those two projects we hope will be done by the end of next year.
You know, you talked a minute ago about people going through their financial plan and typically tuning out halfway through. What I've seen is that oftentimes it's the spouse that's, you've got one that's all in on the financial planning, and the spouse is like, oh, do we have to do this? You convince them to sit through it, then they sit through it, and it's like, do I have to go again because I did this time? Do I really need to do that? And I think that's where the disconnect happens, because the financial future of your family is together and should be decided as a whole so that you can achieve those goals. So often I've interviewed people that went through financial ruins because one spouse or the other was on a freight train of spending,
Yes. We talk about, most of our listeners in the Dynamic Mapping podcast are middle-class millionaires. And we define that as households that have $750,000 in investable assets or more, but control over their budget. Because I know plenty of people who have more than that, but they don't have control over their budget, and they have got to fix that. And that's another part of the financial planning process. The word budget, so many advisors will ask them to create one, and I would guesstimate less than 20% of the people they ask to do them actually do it, and an even smaller percentage do it correctly.
Yeah.
So we are not a fan of that exercise. We do a process called dead reckoning, which is actually a sailing term. And the point of dead reckoning is not necessarily saying, okay, this is what you can spend in a month. Let's track what your spending patterns are. What is the gain or the loss in terms of spending from month to month, so that if there's no real change and you're spending the same amount, everything's fine. If it gets really out of whack, then of course you got to find out what's going on. But typically it keeps people from freaking out, and it takes about 3 minutes a month once you've set this thing up. It's really easy.
I've tried a number of